Today we have to talk about HIV post-exposure prophylaxis. It's a very important topic because in your exam they are going to give you different scenarios and they will ask your opinion that who should be getting PrEP. This guideline has been updated on April 6, 2021, so it's really very important and expect to answer some questions. Basic questions that they are going to ask you are when to offer post-exposure prophylaxis, then what PrEP to prescribe, when to start PrEP, and what baseline tests should be done, how you are going to follow up, and what are additional considerations for all patients receiving PrEP. So HIV guidelines, they have recently been updated, like the drugs have been changed, who should be getting it, this information has been changed, so you should be familiar with the subject. So let's see that's what's new in this guideline. So here the indications for and management of the PrEP following occupational exposure, especially sharps like percutaneous injuries, splash like mucocutaneous injuries, and bites, these are also covered. Then PrEP following the drug, injecting the drug use, and sometimes including they are using sexualized drug use like for rape or for other activities. Sometimes people they take drugs, so then how they can prevent themselves. Then another important point is that what should be the source of unknown HIV status. So no longer they use this information, like the prevalence of the HIV is very high in a certain group, so just by default we should be offering them the treatment. This is not true, this is not good anymore, so they have changed it. Then other indications are if somebody is having receptive vaginal course with a person of unknown HIV status from high risk group, then PrEP is now generally not recommended unless we have some specific information. If they are having insertive vaginal sex with a partner of which unknown status from the high risk group, then PrEP is not recommended. Then sharing of the injecting equipment with a partner of unknown HIV status from the high risk group, PrEP is now generally not recommended. So read the question of the stems given in the SP very carefully. Okay, human bites, PrEP is generally not recommended. The recommended first line PrEP regimen is tenofovir disoproxil 245 mg with emtricitabine 200 mg with raltegravir 1200 mg OD for 28 days. This is very important because they are going to give you a combination of the drugs that which one you are going to use for PrEP. So you should remember you are going to use tenofovir disoproxil. Doses you can ignore, but remember the combination tenofovir disoproxil with emtricitabine with raltegravir. If you can remember the doses, that's wonderful. Otherwise, just remember this combination. If you will recall, in 2019 we were giving just a single dose of prophylaxis, which was raltegravir. Okay, but the new evidence is emerging, so the guidelines are also changed. So you are going to give these treatment drugs as the first line PrEP, and that too for 28 days. Even before we were giving for 28 days, but the drugs were different. Then final HIV testing is recommended at a minimum of 45 days after the PrEP exposure is completed. You are going to do minimum. This is after 45 days. You are not going to test immediately because it may not turn out to be positive. Why? Because the level of the antibodies or antigen is not there. So we cannot find anything. And if the 28-day course is completed, then this is a minimum of 73 days after exposure. So pay attention. If the patient has, somebody has been exposed and they have not received any treatment, then you will request testing after 45 days of PrEP. But if he was receiving this 28-day course, then in 45 days we are going to add these 28 days also, because what is the purpose of this therapy? It is going to suppress the viral load. So you are not going to get the real picture. So you have to do it after 73 days after exposure, not after treatment, after exposure. And after sexual exposure, this can be performed at 12 weeks to align with syphilis testing. So if you are testing with for other STIs like syphilis, then you can do that after 12 weeks. Otherwise, you can do after 10.5 weeks after receiving this prophylaxis, and 45 days minimum after the PEP exposure is completed. This is the case when no drug was received. So testing is like, it is more detailed. So what are you going to do? So you have to co-test for the hepatitis C PCR also. On hepatitis C antigen, it is suggested following high risk exposure, as antigen based tests, they have a shorter window period than hepatitis C antibody. So the antigen is going to stay there for a shorter period of time as compared to the hepatitis C antibody. Indications and management of PEP exposure in the context of the hepatitis B infection is also included. It is as before. And then HIV PEP regimen for the breastfeeding mothers, they are also changed, so we are going to discuss them. Then there are certain indications for use of PEP in population using HIV PEP. These are also discussed here. And then they have changed the form also, that you should know that who you should be screening and who should not be screened like that. So now the question is when to offer the post-exposure prophylaxis. So there is no evidence to inform that what is the exact risk threshold at which the PEP is indicated for any individual, population or any group, and the cost effectiveness of the prescribed drugs. So before we said that the risk of HIV transmission is more than 1 in 1000, then PEP is recommended. And if the risk is between 1 in 1000 to 1 in 10,000, then PEP should be considered, as the chance is less than 1 in 10,000. PEP is not recommended. Like it means that if the probability is that one person out of 10,000, 1,000 to 10,000 is going to get infection, then we will have to give the PEP. But if the incidence is less than 1 in 10,000, then we are not going to offer this recommendation, this PEP. Okay. Then they recommend the benefits of the PEP are likely to outweigh the risks, and PEP should be given unless there is a clear reason not to give. So you should consider the risk of transmission is low and the risk benefit balance of the PEP is less clear, and the risk should be assessed on a case by case basis. So you cannot follow any hard lines. Okay. So the general recommendations are that when the risk of HIV transmission is very low and the potential toxicity and the other side convenience of the PEP is likely to outweigh the benefits, unless there is a clear specific factor where you know that this person has risky lifestyle and she is going to get infection, then you will have to give the PEP. So basically remember that if the chance of developing this risk of developing this HIV infection is more than 1 in 10,000, then you are going to give PEP. If it is less than this one, then you are not going to give it to anyone like that. Then other indications are when to prescribe PEP following sexual intercourse. So a PEP should be given when there is a significant risk of HIV transmission. Like the person is tested positive, his viral load is very high, there are multiple episodes of sex, and with this high risk population, then we are going to give them PEP, this post-exposure prophylaxis. And the risk and benefits of providing PEP for adolescents, they should be weighted carefully in the context of UK laws and judgment about autonomy in healthcare decision making. So basically they are asking you that you need to check Fraser competency. What is Fraser competency? We will talk about it. And it should be balanced against protecting young people from harm. So Fraser competency is that the person is having mental capacity, they can understand the information, they can think about it, and they can convey their message, their opinion back to you. Then the thing is that you should not be withholding this treatment, because you give them the treatment or you don't give it to them, anyhow they are going to continue the sexual activity. So you have to give them benefit. Okay, maintain their privacy. If they are mentally competent, they are able to understand everything, then you are going to give them prophylaxis everything. And where you doubt mental capacity, you don't have to ask the family members, because this is a child or this is adolescent. So in that case, if a person doesn't have capacity, then you will have to ask the legal guardian, and you will have to ask the guardian if they are interfering. Then you have to obtain legal order, even if the mom is fighting with you. So you are not going to listen to her. You are just going to request. You are going to request legal order. Okay, that is one thing. Then index partner is of unknown HIV status. In that case, proactive attempts they should be made to establish the HIV status of the index partner, and this should not be like delay initiation of the PEG where these are indicated, like you have no access to this person, like who has maybe sometimes they are not cooperating with you that they should get this infection, this testing, or they don't want to disclose because of the privacy issue. In that case, you are going to tell them that no, we need to do this, we need to give this profile access. Why? Because it is important for the patient, because if we will not give, your patient is going to suffer like that. So if the partner is known to be HIV positive, then what will be your answer? So you should, at the earliest opportunity, you should try to determine plasma HIV viral load and resistance to profile and the treatment history of the index partner. You know that drug resistance is also a concern. PEP is not recommended if the index partner has been on ERT for at least 6 months with an undetectable plasma viral load and like at the time of last measurement and within the last 6 months with good reported adherence. So for 6 months the partner has received the treatment and he is adherent, he has good compliance. In that case also, you don't have to give that. Then individuals, they should be encouraged to undergo a formal PEP assessment and verification of the index partner's HIV details even when they believe that the partner has an undetectable viral load. Where you have the full information, don't give it because the level is low. Where you don't have no information, then we have to give them PEP assessment, okay, the partner, that what is the level. If they tell you that orally, because patient is giving you the subjective info, it has no significance. Okay, so there should be objective evidence that the test has been done and it has been found that their level is negligible or undetectable, so in that case PEP will not be recommended. But if their level is like not suppressed, in that case you need to give them PEP prophylaxis with the 3 drugs like I have told you in the start. And if there is any doubt about the ART history, the index partner's adherence to the ART or the viral load, then PEP should be given following like there was no condom and they have had this receptive anal intercourse. So in that case, no history, nothing, or there is any doubt is there, in that case you are going to follow the advice. Okay, you will have to give the PEP prophylaxis for these patients like that. So there is a like specific way of calculating the risk, but you are not, there I don't expect you to give them this info. But just remember that the risk of HIV transmission is equal to risk that the source is HIV positive with a detectable viral load and then into risk per exposure. So 1 into risk per exposure, like that. Okay, so they will not ask you for the calculation, but it is known that per episode the risk of transmission is like 0.015 or 1.5%, like that. It can be significant like that. Okay, so you have to pay attention. They will not ask you to calculate, they will just ask you in which conditions you are going to give them the prophylaxis. So just remember these 4 points. Okay, that is the point. The drugs which you are going to give, yes, they are important, you should be knowing about the drugs like that. Then a very common exam scenario, like a patient has had this sexual assault, so this is a concern. Okay, and then the transmission of HIV is likely to be increased as a result of any trauma following aggravated sexual intercourse. Maybe it was anal or vaginal, but maybe it was forced. So forced act, so maybe the patient has breach of the mucosa, so the chances of infection are going to increase. So the clinician, they may therefore consider recommending PEP more readily in such situations, particularly if the assailant is from the high prevalence group like that. And if the assailant is from a low prevalence group in the UK, then after the balance of risk and benefits they have been discussed with the patient, it is likely that PEP provision will generally not be indicated. Like the chance of heavy infection is very low, in that case we will not offer it to anyone. But if it was like aggravated and the person, the assailant is known to be like it was in the group, like they were doing the drugs, something happened like this, so you read the scenario very carefully and then you have to decide according to your judgment like that. Regarding commercial sex workers, so it is known that unfortunately HIV prevalence among the female sex workers, it varies by the region. Okay, so we don't exactly know that what is the chance, but still it has remained low, like less than 1% in the Europe and the Central Europe, but it is higher in the Eastern Europe, ranging between 2.5 and 8%. And HIV prevalence is highest in sex workers who are IV drug users also, IVDU, IV drug users also. HIV prevalence among the male sex workers, it is also reported like it is almost 14%. You can see that it is a big number, right? So then we have to offer them prophylaxis like that. So then when to prescribe the if there are foreign occupational exposures, like very common scenario you must have seen in the exam, like one person has received this prick during surgery, or a nurse was taking the sample for urine and the urine splashed into her eyes, and now she is asking you that she should receive this prophylaxis or she should not. Okay, so both scenarios are different. So if the case is like positive, already positive, HIV positive index case, the current case, the one we are dealing with, so PEP is recommended for a high risk injury like sharp or mucosal splash. And if the index case is known to be HIV positive and is not on ERT for more than 6 months with a suppressed viral load within the last 6 months, so it is not coming alone, it has these brackets attached, these conditions attached. And PEP is generally not indicated for a sharp injury if the index case has been on ERT for at least 6 months with an undetectable HIV viral load at the time of last measurement and within the last 6 months, previous 6 months, and reported good adherence. However, due to lack of the direct evidence, a case-by-case decision it can be made depending upon the nature of the injury. Sometimes you will have no other suitable option in the question, and then the best option would be that you should start PEP prophylaxis. So remember that you are always going to give benefit of doubt to your patient. Okay, so keep your patient protected. So PEP you can give, because the side effects, okay, they will go away after some time, but if the sickness, this illness occurs, then you know that this is lifelong infection, so they will have to be continue on the treatment for longer periods of time. And PEP is not recommended for a splash injury if the index case is known to have sustained undetectable viral loads. So pay attention to the viral load in the last 6 months and then decide accordingly. PEP is also not recommended when there is no or negligible risk of HIV transmission through the intact skin that comes into contact with HIV infected blood or other body fluids. So in the second case I have given you this example, like here a nurse was taking the urine sample, and what has happened, like there was splash of this urine into her eyes. So in that case you are not going to give her any prophylaxis, any PEP is not given here, because the chance of having infection is very very low. That is one point. Okay, so the extensive data, they have told us that the risk of transmission with suppressive ART not applies to the sexual exposures. That is one thing. Okay, the rate is suppressed, so then you don't have to do anything. Now you have exposed your staff or somebody has been exposed to sharps or the splash of the bodily fluids, and here the index case, we don't know whether they had this HIV, or they were like they were clean, like they had nothing in their system. So unknown status. So PEP is not recommended following a sharp or mucosal splash injury if the index case is untested, but they are from a low risk group. Then PEP is generally not recommended following a sharp or the mucosal splash injury if the index case is untested and from a high risk group, like men who were having sex with other men, or other people like who are known to have some infectious disease, like they already had the infection like that. Okay, and unless there were other factors that increase the likelihood of a transmission, for example there was a deep injury or blood bolus injected, or a sharp injury from any sharp injury can be from any subject, anything, then you have to think about it. Then PEP, giving PEP would be better, because the point is that if whenever you have like this evidence that injury was deeper and the virus must have entered the circulation into the tissue. In that case, it is important to provide them with the PEP. And if the index, and you have to test them, all effort should be made to seek prompt voluntary HIV testing of the index case. So here if they ask you that which type of test you can do, so you can do the rapid fourth generation test that is most commonly recommended, or you can go for like now the fifth generation test is also available, but for the rapid test we believe we want to do that because you will get the results within like 20 minutes like that, 30 minutes like that. So that's why that would be recommended. And if the index case is unable to give informed consent for HIV testing, like they are unconscious, they have altered mental status due to the drugs or anything, then the HIV testing can be performed if it is the best in the best medical interest of the index case. So unconscious, but you want to protect your patient, so in that case you are going to give them prophylaxis. You are going to offer them testing like that. So again, this is the same thing, like they are not going to ask you, but these are MCQs. Okay, like a person has had this needle stick injury, so what is the chance that she is going to get this infection? So the chance is going to be 1 in 330. And what is the chance that a person who had like this splash injury, what is the chance that she is going to get this infection? That is 1 in 1000. That's why here the risk is 3 times higher, so we have to give them prophylaxis. So these are important numbers, don't have to read everything given here. So this guideline will be available in your group, so don't worry about it. Okay, so needle stick injuries in the community, so PEP is not recommended following a community needle stick exposure. So it was possible when the person was from like high risk group. Okay, maybe the person high risk group because where the status of the patient has been determined. Okay, or we know about the sexual history of the patient, so we think that this patient is at a high risk of having infection, like he's drug user, had bacterial endocarditis, because they will give you some clue in the history. Okay, but if it is occurring in the community, in that case you don't have to give them any prophylaxis, just forget it. Okay, that is one point. And regarding the risk of having infection, like risk of HIV transmission, that is the risk that the source is HIV positive with a detectable viral load, and multiply that with zero point 0.3, that is the risk per exposure. But again, this is only for your interest because they will not give you that what is the chance. But this question, yes, they can actually they are always asking this question: what is the risk after needle stick injury? And the status of the patient is known, then your answer is 1 in 333. But usually they will give you, they will round it up, like round it off, like they will give you 1 in 300, so that's going to be fine. Then another question they like to ask you, that there were two youngsters in the bar, they had a fist fight and one person has bitten the other one, so are you going to give prophylaxis? So in that case you should remember that human bites are one of the deadliest bites because of the oral flora, and which infection can be there, like Pasteurella multicoda infection can be there, so you have to give them amoxicillin for the prophylaxis. And if in general the PEP is not recommended following a bite, although the precise risk of transmission is unknown. But this is if somebody has bitten you and that person is already known to be like HIV positive, but the chance of having this transmission of infection is negligible. However, PEP should be considered for patients who fulfill all of the three following criteria, like the biter's saliva was visibly contaminated with blood. Okay, then the biter is known or suspected to have plasma viral load of more than 3 log copies per ml, and then the bite has resulted in severe or deep tissue injuries, like viral load was more than 3000, and then copies per ml, and then visibly there is some injury, like you have seen some blood or something. In that case you should go for prophylaxis. Then the people who inject drugs, so what should be done? So individuals who report the use of any injectable drugs, they should be asked specifically if they are currently injecting, and if so, is equipment ever shared, or they are using only for themselves. Okay, because if they're sharing the needles between them, then they are exposing each other, okay, to the risk of getting not only this in this HIV but other infections also. So the HIV status, and if positive, the viral load and the ART history of their injecting partners, they should also be ascertained. PEP is not recommended for the prevent after sharing needles equipment if their index injecting partner is HIV positive and not ART for more than 6 months with a suppressed viral load. Because here you already know that the other person is also HIV positive, and like they have received therapy or whatsoever, and their viral load is suppressed, then the chance is very low. And already a person has condition, so here prevention is not required. Now the thing is that we need to control the disease. Then PEP is generally not recommended in this population after sharing needles equipment with an injecting partner of unknown HIV status from a high prevalence country risk group, but PEP can be considered on a case by case basis in this context of the localized outbreak like that. So again, your judgment. So if the person who was receiving drugs and you think that he is at risk of having the infection, just pay attention to the immunity of that patient, okay, that recipient, that if he is immunocompromised or what. Because if he is already immunocompromised, then obviously his chances of getting the infection are higher, okay. So in that case you will have to provide PEP. Then existing harm reduction strategies such as needle exchange and then opiate substitution programs, they should be encouraged for people who inject drugs. Why? Because we have to send them to the rehab, and there the treatment can be continued like that, can be improved, their behavior can be improved, and they can get rid of this addiction. Then men who have sex with men, they should be superficially asked about chemsex, and injecting drug use. Because this was also a question. We are usually telling that for the women, many rape drugs are used, like Ropinol can be used. And for the gents also, like there is one separate topic. I think we have uploaded that on the web page also. Like especially this is for the weekend sex, that they will like to give glycero, trinitroglycerin, and some other drugs like this, while and anxiolytics to relax the anal sphincter. Okay, so that they will, where they are intending to have multiple episodes of sex, or they are having like sex parties like orgies, then you need to ask them that are they involved in such activities, because then obviously it is going to increase their risk of having some problems like that. This table is very important for you. This table 4, you are going to see it all the time. If you have not and you have been unable to read the full guideline, then at least pay attention to this thing. Like if there was like HIV status is unknown, or where the viral load is like undetectable. So if the viral load is known, then it is detectable. Then if a person has receptive sexual intercourse, yes, you give it the prophylaxis. It was like anal sex, even then you have to give them prophylaxis. Even when it was like repetitive receptive vaginal sex, anal sex, in both situations you are going to give. And if it was like insertive, this is for the receptive, receptive, and insertive vaginal sex. So here you are going to consider, I mean, risk benefit analysis and then do it. Okay, that is one thing. So in rest of the conditions, okay, this is related to the sexual exposure. And then if the viral load was undetectable, then you're not going to do anything for them. Okay, that is one point. Then index of the unknown HIV status, then the patient had this receptive anal sex, yes, we are going to give them receptive sex. So obviously they can have injury, they can, because there can be breach in the mucosa, so better to give it to them. If they had this insertive sex, in that case we are going to consider at least. So here we don't know about the group, that what exactly they had and what was the problem like that what was their status like this. So if it is like from the low prevalence group of the country, then we don't have to give it at all. That is the point. Okay. So now the occupational and the other exposures. Here, like sharing of the injecting equipment, so obviously it is recommended regardless of the status, that HIV status was unknown and the viral load is unknown or undetectable, but we knew that these are HIV positives. If we will divide them into two broad categories, this is for those who are already known to be HIV positive, and this is for the people who are like their status is unknown. Okay, so this table is very important for you because it will help you answer many questions. Sharing of the needles, HIV positive population, yeah, recommended. Sharp injuries, again recommended. Okay. Then the mucosal splash injury, high viral load is unknown or it was known to be high, then we are going to give them something. Bites, then generally it is not recommended, but if there is like deep cut, patient is like already taking the drugs, and then the biter's mucosa was stained with blood, in that case, yeah, you will have to give them prophylaxis. In all other conditions, we don't have to give them any prophylaxis like that. So when we are recommending, then the benefits of giving PEP are likely to outweigh the risks, and the PEP should be given unless there is a clear reason not to give. When we say consider, here you will have to do the risk benefit balance, or if it is unclear and but your patient has like some immunocompromised status, patient is has history of getting more infections or previous exposures, in that case you are going to give it to them. And generally not recommended means that the risk is very low, so we don't have to give them anything, because all the drugs they have side effects. Okay, so you have to carry out this risk benefit analysis, and after that you can prescribe something. Then very important question, what to prescribe for PEP. So first line drugs, so it is recommended use of tenofovir desproxil 245 milligram, emtricitabine 200 milligram, and reltigravir 1200 milligram once daily as the regimen of choice. This is for the PEP. So remember these three. If you remember the doses, that's very good. Otherwise, just remember the names. Why it is important? Because before we used to give them either, first we used to give them tenofovir for 28 days. Then we started giving them reltigravir. But now this 2021 guideline says that we have to give them combination. These suggestions were there in the 2019 also, but now actually on April 6th they have implemented these changes that we should give them triple drug regimen. So tenofovir, emtricitabine, and reltigravir. This whole combination has to be given for 28 days. And if there is evidence that the index case it has a current of the past history of ART failure, then expert advice should be sought. So you will refer that person to the HIV specialist. Don't send them to the virologist or anything. These simple things, they can increase your score. So patient has high risk history, problems are anticipated, send them to the HIV physician. Even when you will go to the part 2 or for the part 3, you should know that you are going to send them to the HIV physician. Don't send them to the infectious disease department. Okay, so this is when there is history of ART failure. Why? When we will say that this is failure? Because the patient has been taking the drug and the viral load has not decreased, CD4 count has not improved. So it means that this patient is not having the anticipated response. So in that case, you will have to think about the possibilities, and the possibilities can be either the patient's compliance is low, or if the patient is compliant, then maybe he has like this he's resistant to the drug. So we are referring for two reasons, reviewing the therapy and also for seeing if there is any resistance. Then for women who are pregnant or are at risk of pregnancy, then the use of standard first line PEP regime, it is recommended. They are planning a pregnancy or they didn't use contraception, so now you are going to give them PEP, and that too with the 3 drugs like we mentioned before, like that. So then regarding the NRTIs, you should know that which they will at your level they will ask you that which drugs are recommended. So among the NRTIs, nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitor, these two are recommended. emtricitabine and tenofovir disoproxil. So they are the NRTI backbone. Why? On the basis of their efficacy, tolerability, safety, convenience. So that is the point. Okay, so you don't have to go into the details, just one line. Okay, like that. And the benefit is that if they ask you that what is the benefit, because the tissue levels, they will reach their peak within 24 hours of the dosing, and it can be these levels are maintained for up to 7 days. All of these are like the SPA questions, like what is the benefit. So because whenever you're getting a drug, you have to see that when you are going to get the peak level, what is the half-life of the drug, and then we can continue doing it, and for how long the effect will be continued, and how this is a better. So the point is that these regimens, they are much better than the zidovudine based regimes, because there the compliance and efficacy was 78% for the other. It is 78% for the tenofovir regime, and as compared to the zidovudine based regimens which had efficacy of just 59%. So it is much better like that. Okay, that is one point. Better completion rate. So why? Because the patient is experiencing less side effects, so they are more likely to continue taking this treatment like that. So ignore this whole detail. Okay, we will talk about this more when we will go to the pharma. Second type of drugs are going to be integrase inhibitors, and these are well tolerated, and they have demonstrated that they are very effective. They have efficacy against the non-nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitors and protease inhibitors like that. So that is the point. So then which drug? Of course, Bialtigraver. Okay, the different drugs they have been mentioned, but this is the stereotype drug, okay, or the prototype drug, that other drugs they will have the efficacy of this one. Before, if you will remember, we have been using this one like Dolutegravir. It was all the bird like 2 years ago. Okay, but now we are using Raltegravir all the time. So just remember the drugs, and you don't have to go and like read each and everything about it. Just Raltegravir is the drug of choice, and we have to offer 3 drug regimens, and that is going to be helpful also in the men who are having sex with other men, and this is well tolerated, and higher levels of the drugs they are achieved, and this drug level is safe, and it is tolerated well by like 87% of the people, so it is better to continue with it. So regarding the side effects, the most common side effects of Raltegravir are headache, diarrhea, nausea, and these are more common. Okay, that is the one thing. So one person had like suicidal ideation, but for one person we are not going to change anything. That is the point. Okay, don't have to remember all other drugs. We will just compare them once we will go to pharmacology section like that. So then what are the recommended these combinations? We have already done that. We can give them Raltegravir once daily, then we can give it with like Raltegravir is given, and then we are giving it with emtricitabine, and we are giving it with tenofovir. So sometimes like the person is not tolerating this tenofovir, emtricitabine, these are not tolerating with all of this, then we can give them the alternative combination. Ideally these 3 should be given like mentioned in the first line. These are the first line therapies. Okay, so the alternatives are like we can give them other combination like that. So we can give them Dolutegravir or Raltegravir, and then we can give them Darunavir or Atezanavir. If your patient is like having some allergic reaction or is resistant, then you are going to use any of these drugs like that. Okay, you have to give them the combination, like you have to give them integrase inhibitors, and at the same time you have to give them PI like that. So you can use 2 drugs out of these 4 drugs, but basically you have to choose the drug in from the both groups, because we need complete backup. That is the point. Okay, and why PEP is important? Because otherwise patient is going to have lifelong problems. Then second, so this is the second line. Okay, and this is the second alternative, or the third line will be Albuterol. Then we can give them like this is in combination with cobicistat Then tenofovir, emtricitabine, so these can be given like 1 tablet once daily. If the glomerular filtration rate which is recommended is fine, like 30 to 70 ml per minute, then you can give them these medicines. See, this is like basically a decreased one, because in the normal person the glomerular filtration rate is 120, 125 like that. But sometimes, if they have other problems, then they can have these problems also. More about these drugs we are going to read in the pharma, that what are they going to do like that. So basically the most important thing was that who should be getting the drugs, what are the side effects that you need to tell your patients, basically intolerance. Then the second problem can be like patients, they can have like compliance is poor, so otherwise generally you are not getting any side effects. So then you have to be careful about the drug interactions, because they ask you, and this is very hard to remember. So accurate verified medication history should be obtained, including the use of OTC, over-the-counter medicines like vitamins, minerals, herbal remedies, recreational drugs before starting PEP, to ensure significant drug interactions, that there are no significant drug interactions. Okay, otherwise they can open a new chapter for you. So just take a good history and then they can be prescribed. So then another point is that some of the drugs you will have to be avoiding like that. Some of the drugs, they are like repeatedly given. So of the drugs, we can say that the rifampicin, that is contraindicated with boosted drugs like protease inhibitors and alveltigraver. Reltigraver and the dolutegravir, they require dose adjustment to 800 twice daily and 50 milligram twice daily respectively, because otherwise we are giving the dose like 400, so we will have to give the double dose. This is for the rifampicin. Why rifampicin? Because it is going to induce the liver enzymes. That is the point. Then tenofovir and alfenamide or emtricitabine, the interaction profile of tenofovir is significantly different to the tenofovir, emtricitabine. So in that case, we will have to see that how we are going to change drugs. But here you will have to adjust the dosage like that. Then the timing and duration, for how long you are going to give PEP. So the PEP, it should be initiated as soon as possible after exposure, preferably within 24 hours, but can be considered up to 72 hours. Then it is not recommended that initiate PEP beyond 72 hours after exposure. And the duration of PEP, once you have continued, it has to be continued for 28 days. Typical exam question: that patient has received in that junior ST1, ST2 was assisting you during surgery, and he has received this prick, and it will always occur on the weekend. No one is around. So what is the option? That you should keep this patient in the same status. You should send him to the occupational health, which will be like after 48 hours, or you should, and the patient's status will be unknown or known. So you will have to see that if the status is known, then what is the viral load and like that. And but mostly after exposure you have to start the PEP. So now the question is about the timing, that are you going to wait for 2 days or are you going to start the treatment. So if there is like injury, we have read before, and it is like he was wearing gloves but still it has pricked, so you are going to give them PEP. But if it was splash, in that case you don't have to give it to them, so ignore it. But if the person comes to you after after like 72 hours or more after the exposure, then it is not found to be like very helpful, because already the virus has entered the circulation. That is the point. So we don't have to give them anything. So because there can be like many variations, but you have to stick to the college guidelines. Then how to provide HIV post-exposure prophylaxis. So for PEP to be maximally effective, a 24-hour service is recommended. So like it addresses the point that occupational health will be closed, but either they should get the ER doctor, they should start the prophylaxis, or if the help service has helpline is established, then that specific service should provide prophylaxis. Then the local policies should include 24-hour access to advice from an experienced HIV clinician, particularly for complex cases, like send them to the specialist so that he can decide. But usually this option of the specialist is not given in the exam, so if you think, basically they're going to see that what is your judgment. So just remember these guidelines, just the main tables, the highlighted text, and I don't want you to read each and everything, and rest of the guidance, it has been given, like everything has been mentioned in your notes like that. Okay, that is one thing. So remember, when you have to start PEP, you will not give it blindly to anyone. First we said that we have to take a detailed drug history, what happened, what is their chance that they will be having some problem. All of these things you have to consider. Okay, so routine blood monitoring after initiation of the PI integrase inhibitors based PEP is not necessary unless clinically indicated if the baseline blood tests are abnormal. If we need to take the contraceptive history of the patient, and we need to perform pregnancy testing in all women of a childbearing age and considering PEP and after emergency contraception where indicated. And we have to offer emergency contraception where it is indicated. So we have other guidelines for emergency contraception which are very important, and they should also be on your fingertips. And pregnancy and breastfeeding, they should not alter the decision to start PEP, because it is not going to interfere with anything. Then women, they must be counseled that the antiretroviral agents used for PEP, they are unlicensed in pregnancy, and their risk benefit, it must be carefully discussed before starting the treatment. So they have, that's why we send them to the experts. Then an ultra rapid course of hepatitis B vaccination should be offered if clinically indicated in the absence of baseline immunity. This is very important. So in that case, after exposure, so you think you will give only vaccination or you will give only immunoglobulin? Any opinions? Okay. A full 28-day course of PEP, it can be provided at baseline in some circumstances, like where there are no clinical or adherence concerns, and where the vulnerabilities, they have been identified and leading to concerns that patient may fail to return for a repeat prescription, or if the index case testing is not possible. These are the points. Okay. So first, the drugs are like unlicensed. Okay. So what should be done? The woman, we are pregnant and the breastfeeding mothers, we have to take contraceptive history and request baseline pregnancy test. Okay, and they should, we don't have to make any changes, and we are going to start the treatment for them. And then women who are like pregnant, raltegravir twice daily is preferred as the third agent. And we are accessing the raltegravir 400 milligram, it might cause delay, then it is recommended that raltegravir 600 mg twice daily and switching at the earliest opportunity. Because raltegravir 400, it will be issued only on the order of HIV physician. So if you don't have that one, then whatever you have available, then you are going to start this one. So you are going to give raltegravir 600 mg twice daily and then switching to the 400 mg when possible. Then for women at risk of pregnancy or known to be like within the first 6 weeks of pregnancy, who cannot use first line drugs for the PEP for any reason, then it is recommended that avoid the use of raltegravir as an alternative third agent. Avoiding the use of, it should not be given, because in the animal studies they must have found some abnormalities. So for your level, just remember that raltegravir should not be given. Remember that this can be given as an alternative. So if the women, they are like beyond 6 weeks of pregnancy, then raltegravir, it can be used as an alternative third agent. Like you are going to give, instead of raltegravir, you can give them raltegravir, because they are the same integrase inhibitors. Then women, they should be counseled that antiretrovirals used for PEP, they are unlicensed in pregnancy, and their risk benefit, they should be carefully discussed. And those who are breastfeeding, they must be counseled regarding the transfer of antiretrovirals to the infant via the breast milk. That is the point. Okay. So pregnancy Very important to remember that pregnancy is not a contraindication for the PEP, but at the same time you have to see that she is less than 6 weeks pregnant. In that case, we should not give them like this dolutegravir, but if she is like more than 6 weeks, then you can give them dolutegravir. That is the point like that. Don't have to go and remember like each and every detail of these drugs. And regarding the breastfeeding, you know that they are going to be passed into the breast milk. So again, the dosage and the stuff, it should be adjusted by the HIV physician. Okay, so it will also depend that how many drugs the mother is taking and what are their side effects, for how long she has been taking, and then again you have to do this risk benefit analysis like that. And sometimes, mostly, they will continue the drug, but they will decrease the amount of the drug. That is the point. So then, what is the use of PEP and population who are using like PEP? So the need for PEP, like this is significant potential risk within the last 72 hours, they should be considered in all individuals who are requesting prior to transition to the PEP. Like they want to change the drugs, but you don't have to like um, remember all details of these things, because they are not going to ask you. Basically, they are going to ask you just the main things, which drugs you are going to use, and if anything complicated, then you will have to refer them to the HIV physician like that. Okay, so the drug, you should just remember, the drugs, they are going to be passed into the breast milk. So we have to tell the patient about this, we have to counsel them. And then the point is that usually it is recommended that we don't that the mother, she should not be breastfeeding. Why she should not be breastfeeding? Because that she will increase the chance of transmitting infection to the baby like that. That is one thing. Okay, but if the viral load is like excessively stressed, in that case, only on the advice of the HIV physician, you can allow her to continue to breastfeed the baby. Because this is also a SP question. What is the woman is not on prophylaxis, so what is the chance that if she will breastfeed, she will transmit the infection to the baby? The chance is like 28%. Okay, and that can be reduced to 1 to 2% if she will be feeding the baby on formula milk like that. Then in the some special scenarios, they like to ask you that the patient has chronic hepatitis B virus infection and she has like HIV also, so what are you going to do? So regarding chronic Hep B infection, baseline hepatitis B testing, it should be undertaken in those of the unknown Hep B status. And the vaccination, like the immunoglobulin, and depending upon the risk of exposure, vaccine and plus immunoglobulin, they both should be initiated in those who are not known to be immune while awaiting results. High risk is there, and you are going to give it to them. Okay. Then consider the use of standard PEP for individuals known to have chronic hepatitis B and on either a nucleoside like analog, except in those who are already receiving like combined therapy with tenofovir, lamivudine, or they are on the emtricitabine, and they are like or they are pregnant, and then interferon alpha treatment, it should not be given like that. Sometimes they can ask you that patient is Hepa B positive, so which drugs should not be given to her? Any idea? Like which drugs are contraindicated? Are you going to give her interferon?
Not sure.
Interferon we will not give, okay, because that is immunomodulator, so we will not give it to them. Like most of the
Okay.
drugs, they're not given. Only a couple of them are given. So I would suggest that the patient has like chronic infection, then lamivudine is not given. Okay, so you will have to see that which one is given during pregnancy. Ribavirin, can we give that one? So you need to go back to your HIV infection and then you need to revise that, because everything has been given there. I asked that one in the last week, that go over these things, and the PEP we will be covering in the class like that. So anyway, the individuals who are found to have Hep B virus infection at baseline, they should receive PEP as they needed without any delay like that. Then individuals who are found to be HPV infected at baseline, they should be assessed by a specialist in hepatitis B viral infection. And then we have to see that we have to continue the HPV therapy in the post-exposure prophylaxis. And if the associated assessment, it doesn't fall within the 28-day PEP, like tenofovir, emtricitabine, then they should be continued pending the assessment. Like you cannot get to the HIV physician, in that case you are going to continue. Lamivudine we don't give any more, and then we have to see that because their genetic barrier to the resistance, and then the tenofovir and the lamivudine, they have dual activity against hepatitis B virus and HIV. Which drugs? Tenofovir and lamivudine like that. Okay? These are the important points that you should remember here. And then on treatment hepatitis, the flare-ups will occur when they are receiving these treatments. Okay, that is one thing. So when the use of daily acting, like dually acting nucleoside analogs, it has high efficacy in preventing HIV infection. So they can be given as like pre-exposure prophylaxis. This PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis. We have two types of prophylaxis, like post-exposure and pre-exposure. So for the pre-exposure prophylaxis, we can give them tenofovir alone, or we can give in combination with emtricitabine, lamivudine, or we can give post-exposure prophylaxis in the form of tenofovir, dolutegravir, and the this emtricitabine or lamivudine. They can be given as combination therapy. So the need for the HIV post-exposure prophylaxis in patients with chronic hepatitis B viral infection. It is established on continuous therapy with tenofovir for the treatment of their chronic hepatitis B infection. And the safety of the short duration tenofovir and emtricitabine lamivudine based post-exposure prophylaxis for patients with chronic hep B and not on the HPV treatment. Ribavirin, actually, when I was asking you, that is also contraindicated. Okay, so for such patients, tenofovir, it can be a good option, or it can be given alone, or it can be given in combination like that. Okay, these are the important points that you need to remember like that. So pre-exposure prophylaxis, in some conditions you have to offer, and pre-exposure is usually like very few conditions for that, but they are more interested in asking you about post-exposure prophylaxis like that. Okay, so don't have to go and do each and everything regarding this use of PEP in populations using pre-exposure prophylaxis. This is an interesting area, that if she has received pre-exposure prophylaxis, so should that person receive post-exposure prophylaxis also? What do you think? Okay, we'll talk about it. Okay, so the need for PEP, like there is significant potential risk within last 72 hours, then it should be considered in all individuals who have requested pre-exposure prophylaxis prior to transitioning to the pre-exposure prophylaxis. Actually, for the pre-exposure prophylaxis, we are offering other combinations also. Then decisions about the need for the PrEP in the setting of the people on PrEP, but less than the optimal PrEP adherence. It depends upon the length of the time and the last dose of the PrEP and the site of exposure. So mucosa has been breached, then of course you have to give. Okay. Anal sex, if only exposure has been through the anal sex, and for the people on daily PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, where the fewer than 4 pills they have been taken in the last 7 days. Okay, so then you have to give them post-exposure prophylaxis. Then
Who
all
will
for
be the who will be the category of people who will get like a
pre-exposure
pre-exposed?
prophylaxis, yeah, like they are receiving some organ, very rare conditions, but or they are undergoing like some investigations like that. Okay, like then the
Okay.
people who are going for the this IVF pregnancy, right, but they don't want to
Okay.
have like artificial techniques, they just want to have like receptive intercourse and stuff. So in that case we are giving them pre-exposure prophylaxis. I will take you there also, don't worry about it, because it is also interesting topic. Just in a moment we will finish this one and we will go to the pre-exposure.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
vaginal, where the potential HIV exposure through the vaginal sex and the pre-exposure adherence, it has been suboptimal. Then PEP should be considered if more than 48 hours have elapsed since the last dosing, or if fewer than the 6 tablets they have been taken within the previous 72 days, 77 days, like that. And then frontal or the new vaginal sex, then the partner exposure to the HIV is through frontal sex in like transgender trans men, or through the new vaginal creation, like in the transgenders, new vagina was created. Then post-exposure prophylaxis should be considered if more than 48 hours have elapsed since the last dosing, and if fewer than 6 tablets have been consumed in the previous 7 days, like that. These are the things. And sometimes, like when people are missing contraceptive pills, similarly the patients, they can miss the post-exposure prophylactic doses also. Then what should be done? When we should continue the PEP due to the missed doses. So individuals, the missing doses of PEP, they should be counseled according to the number of the missed doses and the time elapsed from the last administered dose. Actually this is like specialty subject, but just for your interest I can show you here that the half-life of reltigraver is approximately 8 to 12 hours. Tenofovir and the emtricitabine, they have plasma half-life of 12 to 18 hours. So this is the window, right? During which we can give them the other dose, like that. Okay. So, but the product summary, it shows that 31 and 37 hours for tenofovir and emtricitabine, it has elapsed. Then you and tenofovir and emtricitabine, they are evaluated intracellularly, and the median intracellular half-life is approximately 150 to 160 hours. That is the half-life in them. So recommendation on whether and when to discontinue PEP from missed doses is largely empirical, based on biological and pharmacological rationales as well as the exposure. So basically, the point is that this paragraph is important for you. That if the person has forgotten to take a single dose, then just when they remember, they can take the dose. However, if it is time for your next dose, then skip the missed dose and go back onto your regular schedule. This is single dose. And don't take a double dose to make up for the forgotten dose. In the for missed pills, yeah, they can take double dose, but here no concept of double dose like that. In that case, if more than 48 hours have elapsed since the last dose, then they need to discontinue the post-exposure prophylaxis. That is the point. Okay. This is, like I said again, that this is subspecialty subject, but if you specialty subject, so not for you. But this is only in case if they ask you a random question like that. So what is the chance of seroconversion during post-exposure prophylaxis? So the individuals who are having like skin rash or the flu-like illness while they are taking post-exposure prophylaxis, they should be advised to attend for the urgent review to exclude an HIV seroconversion, because now they are becoming symptomatic. Then if HIV test is positive after PEP has already been initiated, then PEP should be continued pending the review by HIV specialist. Because sometimes even prophylaxis is not going to be 100%. What do you think? So in that case we are going to send them to the specialist. So then they can give you a patient who was already on PEP and now they have a re-exposure. Okay, so if the high risk exposure has occurred in the during the last 2 days of the PEP course, then the PEP should be continued until 48 hours after the last high risk exposure, or until 7 days after the last high risk exposure for vaginal frontal sex. So patient was about to complete her PEP course for 28 days, and on day 26 she has been re-exposed. Now the dilemma is that we should stop the prophylaxis or we should continue. So we should continue for 48 hours, and until 48 hours after the last high risk exposure anal, for anal sex, or until 7 days after the last exposure for vaginal and the frontal sex. So just remember that then you will have to extend the prophylaxis. So regarding the pre-exposure prophylaxis and those with ongoing high-risk behavior, then repeat attenders, they should meet with a sexual health advisor, and then psychological assessment should be done, counseling should be done, and then they can tell them again for the counsel them on the safer sex strategies. Then PEP should not be considered or encouraged as a first line method of HIV prevention. This is not the first line method. First line method is that they should use the barrier methods, okay, and they should avoid having sex with someone who has this who is not willing to use the barrier method. But people, they will make mistakes, so that's why you will have to provide, but tell them that PEP is not used as the first line method of HIV prevention. That's totally unacceptable because of the side effects, right? Then individuals who are presenting for post exposure prophylaxis and they're likely to have like ongoing high risk behavior, they should be like transition immediately to the pre-exposure prophylaxis. Then HIV testing with combined antigen antibody lab testing, it should be performed at the time of the transition. So that's all you need to remember for this guideline, nothing else. So that was all that you need to know about the pre-exposure, about the post-exposure prophylaxis.